I'm just showing you there's this heavenly council where this courtroom happens and these individuals are dialoguing with God in the heavenly realm. Go to the Psalms. This happens in several of the places in the Psalms. Go to Psalm 29. Psalm 29 and verse 1. Psalm 29 and verse 1 says, ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. And this idea of the heavenly beings, that's this divine council. Psalm 82 and verse 1. Psalm 82 and verse 1 has a similar idea. Psalm 82 and verse 1 says, God has taken place in the divine, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Or Psalm 82 and verse 6, I said, you are God, sons of the Most High, all of you. And you'll see a similar thing in Psalm 89:6 and Psalm 89:7. And so in the Old Testament, there is this like divine courtroom, and these heavenly beings come in and God holds court, and they'll bring up things to him and they'll ask questions or they'll make assertions. So there's one individual here referred to in verse number 6 as Satan. In Hebrew, though, it's not a proper name. It's a description. It's Hasatan, which means the Satan. In Hebrew, this phrase is used in various places. It's not just about the devil. It's talking about the person who is the adversary. The thing about Job to appreciate is this. Most of us can do the right thing one day. But can you do the right thing every day, every time? How does the Bible describe this kind of behavior? The way the Bible describes this is somebody that's walking with God. You just are living with God. The way the Bible describes living your life in harmony with God most often is it talks about people who walked with God. Let me show you a few of these. Go to Genesis 5:24. We already looked at Noah, but go to Genesis 5:24. And the first person that gets there, read this. This is about Enoch. It's before Noah. But this is one of the phrases especially used by Moses in Genesis to talk about somebody being faithful to God. And he'll use this phrase of walking with God. So somebody read Genesis 5 and verse 24.
I got it, Brother Hiram.
Go
It
ahead.
says, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him.
Enoch walked with God. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that he and God went out and walked around the block. It's saying Enoch lived his life with God. Genesis 6 and verse 9. We already read this one, but I'll read it again. Genesis 6:9 says, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation, and Noah walked with God. One more, go to Genesis 17. Genesis 17. This is God speaking to Abraham and telling Abraham what he should do. But we know Abraham did this because his life is pronounced as one of faithfulness, and he's called the father of the faithful in places like Romans chapter 4. But Genesis 17 in verse 1, it says, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I'm God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. Similar thing said about Job, right? Be blameless. Blameless doesn't mean sinless. Blameless just means nobody can charge you with any sin that you've done and like you haven't repented. You didn't want to make it right. You're an upright person. You do right, and when you do wrong, you make amends. You confess. It's the Hebrew word tamim, and it means, or the Hebrew word tam, it means to be whole, to be complete. And that's what it means. The older translations translate this as like being perfect. But the idea is being a whole and complete person. Where there are shortcomings, you acknowledge them, but your general life posture and your general pursuit is righteousness, holiness, and godliness. Yes, Sam, go ahead.
And I guess that's where the sacrifices come in when we make mistakes. You know, like that Job was doing. I just thought it was neat because I was looking through my logos in the Genesis 3:8 when the Lord was walking in the garden, Adam and Eve hid from him. And so walk with God is not hiding from him, but correcting our sins and continually being in that way.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's about the walking with God in the Bible isn't about hiding, it's about owning up, right? Proverbs 28 and verse 13 says, he who covers his sin will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes it will find mercy. So if we sin, we don't want God to have to come looking for us. We just open up and come out and say, yes, God, you got me. I stumbled. I blew it. Here's where I went wrong. And God will hear and God will honor that request and God will bless our lives. So Job's a righteous man. Now let's get practical. Just think about your life. Listen to these words one more time from Job chapter 1 and verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. If somebody was writing a biography about Gracie or David or Samuel or Christopher or Sergio or Hiram, how would your biography open? What would people say about you first thing? See, for Job, the first thing that was said about him was, this is a man who loves God and puts God things first. First thing that was said about Job wasn't his job or what he did for a living or how much money he made or any of those things. The first thing said about Job is, this is a spiritual man that cares about spiritual things and that has spiritual priorities. This is a man who had his life in order. And that's all any one of us could ask. And so at the end of the day, this is what we want said about us. Now, let's look at the invitation to test Job. That's Job 1, 6 through 12. And it reads this way. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and turns away from evil? And then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So this is the invitation to tempt or to test Job. Job is righteous and upright, and he's gained the attention of the heavenly courtroom. So we don't typically refer to it this way, but the Old Testament does make mention of a sort of divine council. That is this divine courtroom. I know we don't think about it this way, but in the Old Testament, there are these pictures of like a divine courtroom. God's on the throne, and you've got these various heavenly beings that do, angels and others who approach God, and there is this divine courtroom. Some of the places where this occurs is like 1 Kings chapter 22. Go over there. Let me show you. 1 Kings 22, because that's what's happening in Job 1. There's this divine courtroom, and people come in with their complaints, and God answers them. But 1 Kings 22, this is when Ahab and Jehoshaphat want to go to Ramoth Gilead, and they want to get a piece of property that they think belongs to Israel. They want to go in battle. And Jehoshaphat says, we should probably talk to the Lord about this. And one of the prophets named Micaiah says, don't go into battle. But Ahab still wants to go anyway. And so Ahab wants his false prophets to tell him, God says you all can go to Ramoth Gilead and be successful. Here's what happens in 1 Kings 22, starting out in verse 19. It says, and Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. So in this heavenly courtroom, these angels say, we'll go be a lying spirit in the mouth of one of Ahab's false prophets. If he wants to be lied to, he'll reap what he sows. I'm just showing you there's this heavenly council where this courtroom happens, and these individuals are dialoguing with God in the heavenly realm. Go to the Psalms. This happens in several of the places in the Psalms. Go to Psalm 29. Psalm 29 and verse 1. Psalm 29 and verse 1 says, ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. And this idea of the heavenly beings, that's this divine council. Psalm 82 and verse 1. Psalm 82 and verse 1 has a similar idea. Psalm 82 and verse 1 says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Or Psalm 82 and verse 6, I said, you are God, sons of the Most High, all of you. And you'll see a similar thing in Psalm 89, 6 and Psalm 89, 7. And so in the Old Testament, there is this like divine courtroom, and these heavenly beings come in, and God holds court, and they'll bring up things to him, and they'll ask questions or they'll make assertions. So there's one individual here referred to in verse number 6 as Satan. In Hebrew, though, it's not a proper name. It's a description. It's Hasatan, which means the Satan. In Hebrew, this phrase is used in various places. It's not just about the devil. It's talking about the person who is the adversary. And he comes into the camp, and the English Bible fast forwards this person to the Satan and the devil in the New Testament. And this might be the devil. This might be the Satan. I believe it could be, but it doesn't have to be. I like to refer to him as the Satan because that's how the Hebrew text refers to him, the Hasatan. That's who he is, right? The Satan. So if you think this is the devil, at least here's a few things to think about, okay? If you think this is the devil in Job 1, here are just some things to consider. I'm not saying it's not, but here's some things to consider. Number one, if this is the devil, how is he in heaven? If this is the devil, how does he come into the direct presence of God? And then if this is the devil, in all of Job and his friends' arguments and comments, they never say that Job could be suffering because of the devil. They never bring that up. They say Job might have sinned. They said Job says God's picking on him, but nobody ever says, hey, it's the devil. The devil's tempting Job. So for whatever reason, that's not one of the things they say. It's at least interesting to know. It doesn't have to be the devil. The phrase Hasatan is not a name, it's a title, which means the adversary or the accuser. And it's used in other places in the Old Testament, like Numbers 22 and verse 22, 1 Samuel 29 and verse 4, and Zechariah chapter 3 and verse 1. And so could be the devil. I believe it possibly is, but I'm saying it doesn't necessarily have to be. It just means the accuser.